In the early morning of June 30, 1908, a massive explosion occurred deep in the forests of Siberia. It happened near the Podkamennaya Tunguska River, in one of the most remote regions of the Russian Empire. At first, very few people understood what had taken place, but what happened that day would later become one of the most mysterious natural events in modern history. The explosion was so powerful that it flattened an estimated 80 million trees across more than 2,000 square kilometers of forest. For comparison, the blast released energy roughly equivalent to 10 to 15 megatons of TNT. That is hundreds of times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Yet strangely, when investigators finally reached the site years later, they found no crater, no obvious impact site, only endless miles of scorched and fallen trees. The event became known as the Tunguska Explosion, but what exactly caused it remains a subject of debate even today. To understand the scale of the event, we must begin with the eyewitness accounts. In several villages, hundreds of kilometers away, people reported seeing a brilliant blue-white object streaking across the sky. Some witnesses said the object appeared as bright as the sun. Others described a glowing fireball moving rapidly from south to north. Moments later, the sky erupted in a blinding flash. Then came the shockwave. Windows shattered, buildings shook violently, people were thrown to the ground. In some villages nearly 60 kilometers away, witnesses reported feeling intense heat on their faces, as if they were standing near an enormous fire. One man later said the blast felt as though the sky had split in two. Several minutes later, a thunder-like sound rolled across the sky for hundreds of kilometers, but the strangest effects came in the days that followed. Across Europe and parts of Asia, the night sky became unusually bright. People in cities like London and Stockholm reported being able to read newspapers outdoors at midnight without artificial light. Scientists believe this strange glow may have been caused by dust particles thrown high into the atmosphere. Yet at the time, the cause of the explosion remained completely unknown. Part of the mystery comes from how remote the region was. The Tunguska Event occurred in a sparsely populated wilderness of Siberian taiga. There were very few settlements nearby, and Russia itself was about to enter a period of enormous political turmoil. World War I would begin only a few years later. Then came the Russian Revolution. Because of this instability, no serious scientific expedition reached the site for nearly 2 decades. Finally, in 1927, a Russian mineralogist named Leonid Kulik led the first official expedition to investigate the area. When Kulik arrived, he was astonished by what he found. Trees lay flattened in every direction. They had been knocked down in a radial pattern, all pointing away from a central zone. But in that central zone, something strange appeared. Many trees were still standing upright. However, their branches had been completely burned away. They looked like bare wooden poles sticking out of the ground. This pattern suggested that an enormous explosion had occurred above the forest. The blast wave had knocked trees outward from the center, while intense heat had scorched the trees directly below the explosion. This observation led Kulik to suspect that a meteorite had exploded in the atmosphere before hitting the ground. Today, scientists call this type of event an airburst. Instead of striking the Earth's surface, the incoming object disintegrates in the atmosphere, releasing an enormous amount of energy. But even with this explanation, many questions remained. For one thing, no large fragments of a meteorite were ever found. Despite several expeditions and decades of searching, researchers recovered only microscopic particles that might be extraterrestrial in origin. Another mystery involved the shape of the destruction. The area of flattened forest was extremely large, yet the center of the blast did not show the deep crater normally associated with a meteor impact. This unusual combination of evidence opened the door to many alternative theories. Some researchers proposed that the explosion may have been caused by a comet fragment. Comets are largely made of ice and dust. If such an object entered the atmosphere, it could explode in midair without leaving large pieces behind. Other scientists suggested the object may have been a stony asteroid that completely vaporized during the explosion. Over the years, more unusual theories also appeared. In the early 20th century, some people speculated that the blast was caused by a miniature black hole passing through Earth. Others believed it might have been the result of antimatter colliding with the atmosphere. Still others suggested that the explosion could have been caused by a malfunctioning alien spacecraft. However, these ideas have little scientific support. Modern research strongly favors the meteor airburst explanation. In recent decades, scientists have used computer simulations to reconstruct what likely happened. According to many models, a space object between 50 and 80 meters wide entered Earth's atmosphere at extremely high speed. As it descended, pressure and heat built rapidly around it. Eventually, the object exploded several kilometers above the ground. The resulting shockwave traveled downward and outward, flattening the forest below. One of the most striking pieces of evidence supporting this theory is the pattern of the fallen trees. When viewed from above, the destruction zone forms a giant butterfly-like shape. This pattern matches the way shockwaves spread from high-altitude explosions. Similar airburst events have been observed more recently. In 2013, a meteor exploded above the Russian city of Chelyabinsk. The blast shattered windows across the city and injured more than 1,000 people. Fortunately, the Chelyabinsk meteor was much smaller than the object believed to have caused the Tunguska event. If the Tunguska explosion had occurred above a major city, the consequences would have been catastrophic. Some scientists estimate that a blast of that magnitude could destroy an entire metropolitan area. For this reason, the Tunguska event remains an important case study for planetary defense. Researchers today actively track near-Earth asteroids that could potentially collide with our planet. Space agencies around the world monitor thousands of objects whose orbits pass near Earth. Understanding past events like Tunguska helps scientists estimate the risks posed by future impacts. Despite the progress made in recent decades, the Tunguska explosion still holds some unanswered questions. The exact composition of the object remains uncertain. The precise altitude of the explosion is still debated, and because the region is so vast and difficult to explore, it is possible that some evidence remains undiscovered. Even so, the Tunguska event stands as one of the most powerful natural explosions ever recorded in human history. An object from space entered Earth's atmosphere. Within seconds, it unleashed energy comparable to the most destructive weapons ever created. Yet it happened in one of the most remote places on Earth. If the same event occurred today over a densely populated city, the outcome could be devastating. More than a century later, scientists continue to study this mysterious explosion in the Siberian wilderness, not only to understand what happened in 1908, but to prepare for the possibility that something similar could happen again. Subscribe to learn what no one told you.